So I started Witch in Darkness in 2020. I started sort of conceptualizing it, and then I started writing it maybe in the middle of 2021, I think. So it's been a long time coming to get it to this stage where I can hold it in my hands. A lot happened while I was writing this book, and I don't think I understood the meaning of the phrase labour of love until this book, to be honest with you. So I'll talk to you a little bit about why it exists and what I meant by writing it, and then I will kind of get a bit excited about the illustrations inside it and explain why they look like they do, and then we'll do Q&A if you have any questions for me. So the first book, Rebel Witch was kind of like my permission slip to witches who felt like they might need that, who had long been reading books that explained, you know, sort of by rote what you do, how things should look, how to cast a circle, how to do a spell, what the sabbats are about, etc. I wanted to write a book that was kind of like, that busted that open and explained that you can be wild and untamed and ungovernable, and that you should have a witchcraft that at least very deeply leans into who you are as a person, and that when you do that, when you make your witchcraft intimate and you align it with what you've been through, what you love most of all, what is completely different about you, things only you understand, then that's where it will start to cook on gas, and spells will work and rituals will heal you and all of that. So Rebel Witch was kind of my philosophy on that, in a sense. I wanted Witch in Darkness to be how we moved on from that into taking the Rebel Witch philosophy and applying it to the worst possible things that can happen in the human lifespan. Why I wanted to go in this direction, I don't know. But I feel like a lot of my work on YouTube is about some of the worst things that have happened to me and how I alchemize those things. And so I guess it started to make sense that, like, if I was going to go anywhere else, and if I still had anything worth saying on witchcraft, it would be how to use it when the shit hits the fan, when you feel like you're really at rock bottom and your instinct is to reach for the craft as a form of survival, not necessarily because you have an interest in thriving, but because you have an interest in just living moment to moment, and you need something to help you do that. So I wanted to bring all the ungovernable Rebel Witch stuff in, but connect it to, okay, this is what happens when shit gets very, very real and you're on the edge, basically. Which is why it looks markedly different, I think, to the first book. I think this one, you can clearly see we're going into the underworld here. We're taking the elevator down to Hades with this one. So the writing process, I wanted to keep it very similar to the outline of Rebel Witch, in the sense that the first part of the book sets up the philosophy. So what is this book for? How do I want you to feel by the time you've read it? What's the sort of meaning of the book? The second part is always technique. I think I'll probably do this with every book I write, maybe. Which is funny for a Rebel Witch. I'm like, I've got my system. I'm sticking to my system. I'm not being chaotic at all about it. I've got my system and I like it. So the second part is where the meat is. It's where techniques are. In Witch in Darkness, I'm excited because, unlike Rebel Witch, Witch in Darkness also has tarot spreads in it, which I really think was so appropriate, because tarot is really how I got my start. Anyone who's been here since the beginning knows that I first started blogging about tarot. My channel was all about tarot. I didn't branch out to other things for quite a long time, so it feels a little like sacrilegious that I didn't have any tarot spreads in Rebel Witch, but in part 2 of Witch in Darkness they are there. And every single part, every chapter of part 2 addresses a different life situation. So you've got, you know, your interpersonal dramas in there, relationship stuff, and how to utilise witchcraft to heal in those circumstances, and, you know, to set up boundaries or do a banishing or anything like that. There's also stuff in there about sobriety and the journey of kicking addictions. There's stuff in there about bereavement, you know, about dealing with death, dealing with loss. There's stuff in there about physical well-being issues, mental well-being issues, issues with lack of support, lack of money. There's a whole chapter on the world being in darkness, so it's all about activism and linking your witchcraft to how you want to see changes in this very much burning world. So all of part 2 is kind of, I guess, every way I wanted to write about darkness that occurs and how to apply witchcraft to it. There are journal prompts in it, there are quotes in it, all of that stuff. There is ways that you can very much use the book to actually go into your book of mirrors or go into your sacred journal and actually answer the questions that I've posed to you and really go deeply into your own explorations. And I always wanted that to be the case. And yeah, part 3 is where we troubleshoot, exactly the same as the first book. It's where I take all the most common things I can think witches have ever said to me when they come to me for sessions, when I see them in my comment sections under my videos, when I meet them out in the wild, because I do meet witches out in the world, and they're like, I know you. Hello, help me. I'm like, okay, what is it? So yeah, part 3 is really essentially getting down to any question I could think of from a witch that's in darkness. Questions would include things like, I don't even know if I believe in magic anymore. I don't think I'm powerful enough to do this. I'm insecure. I think other witches are better than I am. I feel like nothing I do makes any difference. My spells aren't working. My deities aren't answering my calls. In a classic kind of list, I suppose, of questions about like why. One of the questions in part 3 is, I do witchcraft for years and years and I still have problems. Like, is that okay? And I'm like, yeah, witches still have problems, as do Christians, Muslims, etc. It's okay. We're supposed to still have problems. Witchcraft just helps you ride them out very strongly. So yeah, part 3, you will probably find at least one question in there that you've had yourself at some point when, you know, the lights went out and everything got very hairy. And considering that is what the book is about, it is about the lowest moments, it is about the catastrophes, it is about crisis points, it is about dealing with all kinds of things that come up, that ache, and are extremely difficult. Because of that, you know, I've tried to be as responsible and sensitive when writing this book as possible. There is a content warning at the beginning, all of that stuff. There are lists in the front of the other things I feel like practitioners should and could be doing to deal with their issues. I feel like magic is not a one-stop shop. It should be part of kind of like, you know, there should be multiple sort of threads we should be able to tie together, and magic is part of it. But I wrote the book very much in mind, keeping in mind that there have been times in my life where there has been nothing but the craft, nothing. I had exhausted every other possibility. I wasn't ready yet to talk about what I was going through, or there was no help available, or the help that I experienced was so subpar, so not what I needed. And at the end of the book, in the acknowledgements, I actually say that, you know, partly the book exists to honour every witch who has sat in the darkness with the light of only one candle and known that that is all they have, that they are really, really down to the wire, and magic is what is going to help them to get up. And I kind of wrote it with that witch in mind. And I was that witch while I was writing it. I went through a major bereavement while I was writing this book. I stopped writing it for a year, in fact, because I just couldn't return to the material. So as I was writing the book, I was like, cool, how witchy is it that I was writing a book called Witch in Darkness, and then I was plunged into what felt like an infinite darkness. And in the first part of the book, I even say that, you know, I took a year off from writing this. When I came back to it and started writing again, I at least knew that nothing I wrote in this book was hypocritical, because when the chips were down for me, I did use the things that I have put in this book. So the things that are in this book are some of the things that kept me alive. So I'm glad it's kind of immortalised. I want to talk to you a bit about some parts that I love most of all. First of all, I love the way, huge fan of it. I knew I wanted a woodcut, like an English woodcut vibe to it. I had a vision in my head, and when you work with an illustrator, you kind of tell them, it's kind of like when you conceive of a tarot deck, and then you go to the artist and you kind of tell them what you want with every card. You know, the illustrator that I chose, Polina Pereva, I've got some of her work. She's a Russian illustrator, and I've owned her work for quite a while. And when I thought of what I wanted Witch in Darkness to look like, I was like, okay, I want it to look like the woodcutting type images that you see when you get off the train at Charing Cross, or like on the front of books of old witchcraft, or like the Book of English Magic has woodcut stuff all the way through it, like repros of old middle-aged woodcut stuff. And I was like, I want it to look like that, but on acid. That's the plan. Like, can we get woodcuts on acid? And she came into my mind because that's the kind of stuff she does. She draws as though she is cutting into wood. And so I approached her and she was down to do it, and so I love it. I explained what I wanted on the front. I think the only thing Fiona and I agreed to change was that I wanted a hand. I wanted the eye on a hand. I don't know if I was going for a Pan's Labyrinth vibe, but I wanted like the eye in the hand, and we were like, where are we going to put the title, Kelly-Ann? If you have all of this shit that you want, where are we actually going to stick the title? So I was like, okay, fine, you can take the hand out, but everything else stays. Okay, I want the snake around the thorns and the poppets and the spell book. And fortunately, Paulina didn't think I was completely crackers, and she made the most beautiful thing. I am so glad to have my name on it. I'm so privileged that it looks like this. And the internal illustrations are really dope as hell, to be honest with you. So the first one is my crying witch in the clouds. I love this one. I was like, I want her to have a wilted rose. She's got to be wiping her tear away. I want her to be looking like she's having an astral journey, but also a really shit day. Flower crown, please. And the next one is my babe that has half a shaved head and half a long plait. I was like, we have to get a wild hairstyle in here. A hairstyle that I had many hairstyles like this through the years. And I said, I want an acid house rave t-shirt, but with a sad face instead of a happy face. And she has a snake wrapped around her leg, and I think that's really appropriate. Because I feel like that kind of, it comes in from the front of the book and sort of like plagues her or them. I feel it's kind of nondescript what gender this person is, but I really love that that came in, and you can see they're holding the candles, so it's almost like, okay, this is my moment. The snake is like crawling up my leg, like this is it now. I have to use the craft to help me. The third illustration is perhaps my favourite, because I really was like, I'm not doing a book this time without some mask imagery in it. I want a bearded man with tattoos and muscles, because so many witches that follow my work look like this, and I don't see this kind of witch represented, and it drives me crazy. So I was like, no, I need a muscle boy, okay, that's clearly like done a lot of facial grooming. And what she came up with was just stunning, and I felt like that was really important to have in there. So yeah, for all of my mask witches, that's for you. I'm really pleased with it. I love it so much. And yeah, it has a few different things in it that I think I haven't seen in books, like the idea of high risk and low risk practices in the craft. This is for people that have kind of issues with mental well-being, with energy management. They have a lot of different things going on. They have different types of vulnerability. I truly believe that some people that are in those situations, they pull away from witchcraft because they think that they cannot do it because they don't have the energy, or it's not going to be safe, or something like that. They can do it. They just need to determine for themselves what categories of the craft they can use. Witchcraft is a huge umbrella. So it might be for someone, for example, who experiences mania, or psychosis, that they may not want to astral travel, they may not want to do any form of divination, and they have to know that there's no shame in that that's the mark of a sophisticated witch, to know what you shouldn't mess with when you shouldn't mess with it, and what you can come back to when you've stabilised, rather than to go into it feeling like I should be able to do this. It's not a case of that. There's so many other things you can do. So there's kind of a list in there of low risk and high risk practices dependent on level of vulnerability and mental stability, I suppose. So I thought that was really important. I've also got in there a lot about, just forget about the perfect practice. The imperfect practice is sublime. It is the supreme way. So there's a lot in there about, like, I want you to witch when you're sobbing on the floor and you've got nothing left, and you just start chanting and you're like, this is it. So yeah, I want witches to be able to know that they do not have to serve the craft. The craft serves them. The craft is supposed to serve you. It is not impatiently, expectantly standing over you like a disappointed parent, like, you've never been to your altar, you missed that Sabbath. Witchcraft is not that. Witchcraft is a tool you can use whatever you're going through in life, however you feel about yourself, and whatever is happening. So I kind of wanted to switch that. There's also a lot of witches that come to me and say, I haven't been to my altar in months, Kelly-Ann, it's dusty, because I just don't have the energy to give to it, I just don't have the energy. And I was like, no, your altar is your charging port. You don't have to give it any energy. If it's a collection of things that represent your witchhood and where you want to focus in your craft, I want you to think of yourself like an old iPhone 4 that's like on 2%. And when you plug into the altar generates energy for you. Don't give anything to the altar, you know. So those kind of reframes, I think, are really important. And yeah, down to earth spellcraft for when things are just really bad, like when you find out your friend that you loved is a bit of a dick, or I mean literally there's things in there about like surviving losing things, you know. Hauntingly, I mentioned witches recovering from natural disasters in there, which seems incredibly poignant right now, but I do speak to many witches who've survived and lost everything from hurricanes and stuff. I have the privilege of working primarily with witches from the US. Actually, I'd say like 65% of my clients are from the US. So there's lots of things I might not have considered, because, you know, a couple of bins blow over in England and we're like, blimey, well, no, in this part of England, it's very stressful, you know, to pick the bins up again. So having those experiences of witches from other places, I've worked with witches that have escaped war zones, like, you know, I'm so impressed by witches that have dealt with things I've never dealt with, and that's gone into my understanding of the book too. I wrote it from the perspective of not only a witch that's used the craft to survive, but a witch who speaks with witches who've used the craft to survive things I actually personally could never imagine. So queer, and it will definitely not live in fear. I'm very pleased with it, and if you have any questions about it, then please go right ahead. I'll be happy to answer them.
I've got a question.
Yeah, what's your question?
So my question is this: so I really enjoyed just now hearing you talk about how your vision of the artwork and how you kind of briefed it and so on, and it makes me realise how important art is to you, which I kind of knew anyway from reading the book. But I just want to hear you talk a bit more about art and being a witch in darkness and how that interacts for you.
Oh yeah, they're inseparable. They're inseparable. Like, art is God, the closest I can get to it. Like, art is one of the highest forms of alchemy and magic going. Like, really, I think if I had to describe myself as anything, I would describe myself as a chaos witch. But if somebody was like, that's not enough, we all know you guys aren't serious, you scry into disco balls and just stop it. Like, what are you really? I would say I'm an art witch. You know, my creative practice and my witchcraft were two circles, then they were a Venn diagram, and then eventually I was like, no, they overlap. And I see it with my friends too, especially my friends from witches, that I'm making magic when I get dressed. When I select what to wear, it is a magical act. You know, when I choose what to listen to, it's a magical act. When I play my drum, it's a magical act. When I do collages, if I approach it as a witch would, and I know that I'm weaving into it something that I want to make manifest, or that I'm forging it with some energy that will help me to release something or protect me from something, it is then a magical creation, you know. I put sigils underneath every collage I make, you know. I know it's activated and it's primed in that way. So yeah, it's highly, highly magical. I think art and magic to me are kind of like, they can be one. You can make art without having any of that intention at all, I think. But of course, isn't it interesting that I've stood in front of so many paintings and listened to so many albums created by people for whom witchcraft has barely crossed their minds, and they have done something alchemical to me. You know, I was just talking to my friend last night about how to me acting is one of the highest forms of magic, because actors can they have changed everything from one performance, like, and they metamorphosized entirely to do that. They left themselves outside the stage room door or whatever. They were like, no, I am this other person now. And I'm going to mess you up with this performance. And I'm there like, I'm changed, I need to rethink my whole everything. Like, that to me is so magical. So I don't think it can be discounted at all. And when it comes to what I want the book to look like, my books to look like, it's a huge privilege to be able to have an artist bring something like that to life, because without the covers of books, oh my goddess, it would be, I mean, it's everything. It is really, oh, I'm there, hello me. Next to Austin Osman Spare. I'm sorry, I'm going to sit down. Next, the granddaddy of chaos magic is here. Oh my god, Austin, I love you. Sorry, I just had a moment there. That was a dream that needed to happen. So yeah, like, it's such a privilege to be able to be like, oh wow, I've gotten someone to dress up this thing so that people understand what they might experience when they read it. I'm so grateful for that. I could not be more grateful for that. Yeah. I won't bite if anybody has anything else they want to ask.
I was going to ask, how did you get into the craft?
Oh, that's a good question.
Bit of a big question, sorry.
My mum first described me as she said, Kelly's very witchy. She's a pagan. And I was like 12 or 13, and I was like, what? But yeah, I guess it was very organic from a very young age, and my parents were not opposed to it. So my mum particularly is a bit all over the place. She's like, I love Jesus, Buddha's my guy, and sometimes when I make a casserole, it's just, it's a spell. I want you to feel good from it. And I'm like, okay, my mum's a bit all over the shop with that. So there was no restriction. So I would do things like, make arrangements of petals and like leaves and stuff on the ground, and like put my hands over them. And like when we went to the Natural History Museum, I was like in the crystal section for ages, like unbeknownst to me I was scrying, but like my mum bought me this hunk of amethyst, and I was like sat there with it all the way home, like, yes, I don't know what I'm doing. As soon as I know what I'm doing, I'm gonna write books about it. I had no idea what I was doing, but it just felt like natural. I was like, this is a thing. I'm like embracing the energy of this sacred geology. And so, yeah, my mum kind of noticed it, and then people just kept giving me tarot decks. Like, my mum's friend gave me a tarot deck after she asked, is it okay? Because I was like 11 or 12 when I was handed a copy of the Marseille Tarot, so I was hardcore from the beginning because I couldn't even read the thing. I was like, Mother, this deck is en français, and I don't know what's happening. But I would just play with the cards, and I loved it, but I was too young to, like, get it. Then when I was 14 or so, an auntie gave me a tarot deck, a Catholic auntie, no less. She was like, take this, don't tell my mum, but I was going to put it in a booster, but I guess you'd like it. And it was the mythic tarot, which is full of Greek myth. Like, it's the whole story of Greek myth. So the universe was somehow being like, come on, take it, you want it. It was like a pusher. And I was like, I just got so into it. It was great. It was awesome. My mum had this witchy friend, and I went round there for lunch one day with my mum, and she was super witchy. And mum said, Kelly-Ann's got like a fear of anything to do with hanging. Like, she's got a real phobia of it almost. I wonder if we showed her the film Braveheart too young, because of all that's in there. And Debbie just went, Frankie, your daughter was hanged for being a witch in a past life. And my mum was like, oh, okay. I wasn't expecting that. But things like that affected me. I was like, maybe I'm supposed to do this. Maybe it's my destiny. So it kind of went on from there. And then I claimed it. I claimed it in my teens, If I hadn't claimed it before the craft, then as soon as that came out, I was like, I'm Nancy Downs, get out of my way. That was it. I was like, yep, this is me now. And it was like that ever since. So it was from very young. Yeah. All good? Yeah? Yeah.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of truism in sort of psychology to say you're most effective when you reach rock bottom. That's when you can make change. It's a very good time to make change. Do you only know when you're at rock bottom when you start making the change? Is it only indicated by the fact that suddenly something does shift? And also, if you feel that you're dipping down towards a rock bottom, can you kind of hurry it along without it being too hot? I mean, it's a way of like saying, okay, I'm declaring this a rock bottom because I really, really, really want to change.
I don't know. That's a really good right. That is a truism of like that it's necessary. It's almost a little bit like the starving artist truism in a sense. It's like you can only really want it if it's like hard or difficult, and then this metamorphosis comes out of it that is so incredible. And I'm more of the school of thought of like, I write better after a nut roast and a red wine, frankly. I don't need to go through that. So it's kind of a similar thing there in the sense of like, it's not true that you need to be at rock bottom to make change. It is true that the urgency that one feels when they know that they are desperate can be alchemized and can be rerouted down a magical course. The way I know I'm at rock bottom is frankly I want to die. And also I revert back to bad habits, self-harm, sort of restriction of food, like habits I vowed to myself I would not start again, that are reflective of the darkest time in my life mental health wise. So when I know I'm at that point, right, I could be really, really down. Like literally I had a major bereavement in 2022, which I'm still very much working through. So obviously one could call that a rock bottom from the moment you get the phone call. And it certainly was. But for me, the real rock bottom is like, I'm thinking of harming myself. I'm thinking of doing something to myself, you know. I'm thinking of causing myself further harm to try to alleviate the suffering or understand the suffering. That to me is when I was like, okay, straight to the altar, because I'm not going back there. Like that is the like truly unacceptable place for me. So I think rock bottom is the unacceptable place, and having spoken with a lot of people who are recovered serious drug addicts, the rock bottom for them sounds very much like that, where they have this moment where they like look in the mirror or something, or they see themselves like in an out-of-body experience, and they witness the agony that they're going through, the distress and what they're doing to themselves, and they suddenly are like, no, that's it now. This is so far to the bottom that I've lost any dignity I could give myself. This is not acceptable to me. So it's kind of that's how I think you know, is when you have this moment of gravity with yourself, and most of the time it's because it's that or death. That is really it. Like with some of the addicts I've spoken to, it was like, this is the last door now that you can choose to walk through to change the game. After that, you're going to die, you know? And so in that moment, they make the decision that like, no, I want something else. I think that's when you know you're at rock bottom, frankly. And then can excellent witchcraft be done? I really do think so. Yeah, because you're in love with your craft then. You're so intimately connected to it. Afterwards, your relationship with the craft has changed fundamentally. You have that moment, you know, when you have a moment with someone in your life who's been with you through so much, and they know you, and you have that moment where you look in each other's eyes, and you just know without speaking, like, I've got you. I know you. I was there with you when it was so, so bad, and I'm so proud of you now. You have that relationship with the craft after you use it at rock bottom. From that moment on, there is no more like, I don't really know if I'm a witch. I feel like, you know, it's a bit kind of abstract. It's not abstract. You know you're a witch to the bone because it saved you. So that, I think, is the most glorious thing about witching in the dark, is that afterwards you're like, oh, I know it saved my life, so there are no more questions, you know. Yeah. That would be my answer to that.
How did you get involved in chaos magic?
That's a good question. Yeah, chaos magic, I love chaos magic so much. The way I got involved with it was, I was looking around in like my mid-20s online, and I always say I was looking for something, and I don't know what I was looking for, but nothing was giving me joy. Like, everything that I was reading about the craft was kind of like not really hitting where I needed it to hit. And I believe that I found chaos magic because I was looking for something that was like going to entice me and tantalize me, and I found it on a forum. One of these like really bolshy, very hyper masculine, like I'm the biggest thing since Crowley, no it's me, I am. And so I was like 3 pages down into this real boys club chat, and I wasn't getting involved. I was just reading a lot of forums and a lot of message boards, and a lot of occultists who probably even now I would say they're way more in it than me. Like, I'm talking, these guys are reading through thick tomes, and I was like in their conversation, and one of them started talking about chaos magic, and then somebody else was talking about chaos magic, and I just immediately was like, that sounds like a very freaky disco. I don't know what that is, but chaos magic together, I got like all these goosebumps, and I was like, chaos magic, Google chaos magic. And so I just started researching it, and I got obsessed. I got completely obsessed. Like, the thing that obsessed me about it was when I looked into the history of it, and it was kind of a dead disco when I turned up. There weren't a lot of people talking about it. Certainly there was no one talking about it on YouTube that I recall when I started being like, guys, I'm kind of into chaos magic. It's like a thing from like the late 70s, early 80s, where these guys got together and came up with these ideas and made these zines and stuff. But the way that I fell in love with it was because it was an antidote to the very like, the sort of like magic by degrees, initiatory, closed club of the occult. Like, you have to be a key holding member, and it was all like a very Crowleyan hangover, I think. And probably the only thing women did in a lot of these orders was like take out the bins and stuff. Like, it was just ridiculous. Like, it didn't feel right. So, you know, Peter J. Carroll, Phil Hine, etc., obviously they were really into Austin Osman Splinter, who really was one of the, I mean, he's the reason that sigil magic exists, I would argue. But they got together and they were just like in these rooms, probably listening to Joy Division and being desperately cool. And they were just like, sod all this boys club crap. This is ridiculous. Like, let's make magic punk. And they wrote these books like Condensed Chaos, you know, Prime Chaos, Liebe Null and Psychonaut. Other guys got involved as well. I've got to give some love to the other guys, Kenneth Grant, etc., etc. There's like quite a bulk of them. And so I just started ordering them and was reading them, and I was like, this is it. These books are what I'm talking about. Like Phil Hine talking about just being so irreverent. It was the only time I've ever read a book about the craft where humour was involved. Maybe there is some of that in the old like teen witch stuff, like Silver Ravenwood, but I don't know because I didn't read that stuff. I was like, I'm a very important witch and I'm going to read these important books. And it was just dead. Like when I read Phil Hine, he was like, look, you're going to have to make a servitor account on a skateboard so you can get through a traffic jam. He was like taking the piss. He was taking the piss. And I loved it. And I was like, I'm laughing. And he was saying, go to a party dressed as Gandalf. Go to a party dressed as an 80s yuppie with shoulder pads and shout down your phone. Like how you would never behave normally. Because you need to decondition your ego to be a magician. You can't bring your ego with you on this. You have to know that you can become something else and then turn back. And I was like, I'm in love with you, Phil. You're the daddy of all time. I love you. And I do love him. I mean, he's very cool. So he was like, I'm not even a KO no more. Like, I'm over that. And I'm like, and I'm picking up what you put down. So yeah, that's how it started. I was looking for something and Chaos Magic rang all my bells, I've got to say. And I've just kind of been hanging out there ever since, really. Chaos Magic. Sounds so cool. I love it. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.